You've earned it. Hudson, every last dollar is yours now. My father's voice carried like a toast at a wedding, bright and proud. The private dining room glowed with warm chandelier light, crystal glasses, and the kind of silence people save for a moment they think will become family legend. Hudson, my little brother, had been back in town for exactly 1 month. 1 month of clean-cut hair, pressed shirts, and a story my mother polished until it shined. My mother sat beside him, smiling like she'd finally gotten the son she wanted again. Across the table, I sat with my hands folded in my lap, listening to applause bounce off the walls. I watched board members, cousins, and family friends lift their glasses while my father continued. The company, the properties, the accounts. It's time we pass the torch to the one who belongs at the helm. He put a hand on Hudson's shoulder. Hudson's grin was practiced, confident, the grin of someone arriving at the finish line without running the race. My mother turned her head slightly toward me, her smile sweet as frosting and twice as cruel. He deserves it more than you ever did. Camille, that sentence didn't sting like an insult. It landed like a verdict. For 5 years, I had kept this family alive. Not with speeches or charm, with sleepless nights, hospital corridors, payroll spreadsheets at 2 a.m., contracts signed with trembling hands after chemo appointments. I had learned how to run a medical supply business while my father lay speechless in a rehab bed and my mother's lungs fought for every breath. Hudson had been gone for all of it, vanished into his addictions, his court-ordered programs, his silence. And yet here he was, crowned in front of everyone, while the room clapped like my sacrifice was a footnote. If you're still here with me, thank you. If you've ever been erased in a room full of people who should have protected you, I'm grateful you're listening. And if you want to support this story, a like, a comment, a share, or a gentle subscribe means more than I can say. I pushed my chair back and stood. The applause fizzled as people realized I was moving. Not storming, not begging, just moving with the kind of calm that makes a room nervous. I walked to the head of the table, heels quiet on the rug, and stopped beside my father, up close. I could see the pride in his eyes. And under it, something else. Relief. He thought he'd finally unloaded the burden of responsibility onto someone else. I placed 4 items on the white tablecloth, one by one. First, the original medical and financial power of attorney my parents had signed during the worst week of their lives, when they couldn't even hold a pen steady. Second, the ring of house keys my father gave me the day I moved back home to take over everything. Third, the small key to the document vault in his study. Fourth, a thick envelope sealed with red notary wax. My initials pressed into the flap. The wax caught the chandelier light like a fresh wound. 20 sets of eyes followed my hands. I could hear someone's breath hitch, someone's fork scrape a plate. Hudson's smile faltered. "What is that?" I looked at him, calm, and said, "Congratulations." Then I turned and started walking toward the doorway. Behind me, my father let out a short laugh, the dismissive kind he used when I was a kid and tried to explain something he didn't want to hear. Always the dramatics. Camille. He picked up the envelope like it was a resignation letter, like it was my final plea. He slid a butter knife under the wax, snapped the seal, and pulled the first page free. I was halfway to the foyer when the sound happened. A glass, slipping, a sharp crack as it shattered against hardwood. I turned just enough to see my father's face drain of color, his mouth working like the words were stuck somewhere deep. My mother half rose from her chair. Richard. What is it? My father's voice finally came out. Loud and raw. You've got to be kidding me. Hudson froze. My father read the first lines again, as if repeating them could turn them into something else. His hands shook so hard the papers rattled. Then one of the board members looked down at his phone and went pale. My bank app just sent an alert, he whispered, holding the screen up. Operating accounts. Frozen. The room didn't applaud anymore. It didn't even breathe. And my brother, the new king of the empire, stared at me like he was finally realizing the throne might not exist at all. When I stepped into the hallway, the noise from the dining room hit me like heat through a cracked door. Chairs scraping, voices rising, someone saying my name like it was both prayer and accusation. I didn't hurry. That was the thing none of them understood about me. I didn't explode. I didn't dramatize. I endured. I planned. I moved when I was ready. 5 years earlier. I came home because Dad had a stroke on a Tuesday morning and the company's payroll was due on Friday. He was the founder. The face. The man who shook hands and made people feel safe. But in the hospital bed. He couldn't speak full sentences. My mother sat beside him. Eyes glassy. Phone pressed to her ear. Telling people, "We'll be fine." While her hands shook so badly she dropped it twice. Hudson didn't answer calls. Not one. Not a single text. He was off chasing his next high in some city none of us could pronounce. While I was sitting in a conference room, explaining to investors why our CFO just quit and why our founder was relearning how to swallow, I became the backbone overnight. I signed vendor agreements with mascara still on from crying in the hospital bathroom. I learned compliance rules between physical therapy sessions and insurance appeals. I sat with Dad's doctors at 9 a.m. and sat with attorneys at 2 p.m. I slept in my childhood bedroom with my laptop open, like a second heartbeat. And every time I asked my mother for help, she'd say, "You're stronger than me." Camille. She said it like a compliment. It was a sentence that quietly buried me alive. The business survived because I refused to let it die. The properties stayed occupied because I negotiated with tenants personally when our manager quit. The staff stayed because I paid them before I paid myself. I ate ramen while our competitors tried to circle us like sharks. And when Hudson finally returned the first time, 2 years into Dad's recovery, he didn't apologize. He asked if the company still had a spare car. That was Hudson, always arriving hungry, never arriving grateful, so I stopped waiting for the family to become fair. Instead, I started protecting what I knew they would eventually try to steal. I met with our corporate attorney and asked one question. If something happens to my dad, what stops my mother from handing everything to Hudson? He didn't answer immediately. He just looked at me like he'd been waiting for me to ask. Then he said, "Nothing. Unless your father puts protections in place." Dad was still fragile then, but he was lucid. Some days he was the old him. Sharp. Stubborn. Proud. Other days he stared through me like he couldn't remember how I fit into his life. On one of his sharp days, I laid the truth on the table. "Dad, I don't want a trophy. I want the company to survive. Hudson doesn't know how to run this. Mom doesn't want to. You need a plan." He frowned. Defensive. "He's your brother, and I'm the one keeping your employees fed." I replied, "We didn't argue long." Dad wasn't a cruel man in his core. He was a weak one when it came to Hudson. He wanted to believe his son could be redeemed. And my mother built her whole identity around that belief. But Dad knew something else too. He knew I was the one doing the work. So he signed documents he never told my mother about. A governance amendment. A protective trust for the company shares. A clause that triggered immediate control transfer to the operating manager if the founder died or became incapacitated. Me. It wasn't revenge. It was survival planning. And then, last month, I received the final piece of the puzzle from our attorney confirmation that the clause would activate fully on the 5th anniversary of Dad's stroke. Because that was the date the board required for a complete governance shift. Tonight's inheritance party wasn't just a celebration. It was my family's attempt to rewrite history before the clock hit midnight. They thought they were crowning Hudson, but the envelope I set on that table was the legal truth they couldn't clap away. My phone buzzed as I reached the lobby. Mom calling. Dad calling. Hudson calling. Then a text from the board secretary. Trembling through pixels, they're panicking. Accounts are locked. Your father is demanding you come back right now. I stared at the screen for a long moment. Then I typed one sentence back. Tell them I'll return when they're ready to hear the truth. I went back upstairs because silence doesn't mean surrender. It means control. When I re-entered the private room, the atmosphere had changed from celebration to panic. It was the same chandelier, the same polished silverware. But the people looked different. Smaller, cornered. My father stood at the head of the table. Clutching the papers like they were burning his skin, my mother hovered beside him. One hand on his arm, the other hand pressed to her chest as if she was the one being wounded. Hudson was pacing in tight circles. Jaw clenched so hard I could see the muscle twitching. The moment he saw me, he lunged forward. You did this, he hissed. You set me up in front of everyone. I didn't flinch. I didn't set you up. You showed up. My mother's eyes flashed. Camille. Stop being cruel. Your brother is trying. Tonight was supposed to be healing. I repeated softly. You mean control? Hudson jabbed a finger at me. You're jealous. You always have been. You couldn't stand watching Dad finally choose me. There it was. The old story. The one they used to keep me small. My father's voice shook. Is it true? Did you change the company structure behind our backs? I stepped closer. Calm. No. You did. You signed it. The room shifted. Several board members exchanged glances. A cousin whispered, What is she talking about? Hudson snapped. Dad wouldn't do that. He wouldn't betray me. My father looked down at the pages again, and something in his face crumpled. I don't remember signing all this. My mother pounced on that weakness instantly. See, he's confused. She manipulated him when he was sick. That's what this is. She took advantage of your father. It was a bold lie. Delivered with the confidence of someone who has never been challenged, I turned toward the board secretary. Do we have the video file? The secretary swallowed and nodded. Yes. My mother stiffened. What video? I looked at her. The signing. The attorney recorded it for compliance. Dad requested it. Hudson's pacing stopped. His eyes widened just slightly, like he could sense the ground beneath him cracking. I nodded to the secretary. Play it. The screen at the end of the room flickered on. The audio filled the space. Clear and undeniable. My father's voice from 3 years ago strained. Slower than usual. But lucid. I'm signing this because Camille is keeping this company alive. Because she understands it. Because she's proven she can do what Hudson can't. A murmur spread across the room like wind through dry grass. The video continued. My father looked directly at the camera. Hear me, he said. This is my decision. No one is forcing me. Then he signed. Then the attorney slid the final page toward him. The trigger date, the attorney said in the video, will be the 5-year anniversary of your stroke. As agreed with the board, my mother's face went pale in the glow of the screen. Hudson stared, stunned, like his body had forgotten how to breathe. The video ended, leaving behind a silence so thick it felt like pressure in my ears. My father sank into his chair slowly. He didn't look at Hudson. He didn't look at my mother. He looked at me, and his eyes filled with something that wasn't pride or anger. Regret. Hudson exploded. This is insane. You recorded him at his weakest. You stole my life. I finally raised my voice. Just a fraction. No, I said. You stole your own life by refusing to build one. My mother stepped forward, trembling with rage. After everything we did for you, you humiliate us like this. I met her stare. You humiliated me for 5 years while I saved you. Then I slid one more document onto the table. The accounts are locked because the governance clause activated. The board has to approve any transfers now. And as of tonight, I'm the operating authority. Hudson's voice cracked. So what happens to us? I looked at him. And for the first time, I didn't feel hatred. I felt emptiness. You learn what it feels like to live without using me, I said. I turned toward the door. Behind me, Dad whispered my name. Camille. I paused. But I didn't turn around, because I knew if I looked back, they'd try to pull me into the same guilt they'd used my entire life. So I walked out, quietly, steadily, and I didn't run. The morning after the inheritance party, I didn't wake up feeling victorious. I woke up feeling clear. Power doesn't arrive with fireworks. Sometimes it arrives with an inbox full of urgent emails and a board meeting at 8:00 a.m., where everyone is suddenly looking at you like you're the adult in the room. I drove to the main office before sunrise. The parking lot was empty. The building was quiet in that way that makes you hear your own thoughts. Inside, I walked past framed photos of Dad shaking hands with governors and hospital directors, and I felt a sharp, strange sadness. Not because I missed the old days, because I realized I'd been living inside someone else's story for years, keeping it alive while mine was ignored. At the board meeting, the CFO slid a report toward me. We can unlock payroll today, she said. But we need your signature under the new authority. I signed without hesitation. Next, the compliance director said, we need to notify vendors that the operating authority has changed. I nodded. Do it. Calm language. No drama. That became my approach. Calm. Precise. Unbreakable. Within a week, the company stabilized in a way it never had during Dad's recovery. Vendors stopped testing us. Employees stopped whispering. The chaos that had hovered for years finally settled because it had a single, steady center. Me. Meanwhile, my family reacted like trapped animals. My mother tried to call 3 times a day. When I didn't answer, she left voicemails that swung wildly between tears and rage. Camille, your father is heartbroken. You're tearing this family apart. You've always been cold. You owe your brother a chance. Hudson sent messages that were worse. You stole my life. You brainwashed Dad. You better fix this before I ruin you. He even emailed the board, demanding they restore fairness. The board forwarded it to me without commentary. I read it once, then filed it away in the folder my attorney called Pattern of Harassment. 2 weeks later, my mother showed up at the office. Not at reception. At the executive floor, security called me. Ms. Hartley. Your mother is here. She's refusing to leave. I walked out and found her standing near the glass wall, dressed like she was attending a gala, eyes glossy, lips tight. "Camille," she said, voice trembling. "Your brother is falling apart. He needs something. A salary, a role, a title. People are talking. People are talking." That was always her true emergency. Not health, not stability, not love. I kept my voice low. "Hudson hasn't worked here in 5 years. He's family," she insisted. "I'm family too," I said. "And you tried to crown him over my labor." Her expression hardened. "You could be generous. You have everything now." I stared at her. "I have responsibility. Not everything. And I'm not paying him to keep you comfortable." Her face twisted. "So you're punishing us?" "No," I replied. "I'm protecting what I built while you were busy rewriting reality." She took a step closer. Eyes sharp. "Your father can reverse this. He can tell the board he was confused." My chest went cold. "If you force him into that day, you'll be committing elder coercion." She froze. I let the silence hang just long enough for her to understand I wasn't bluffing. Then I said gently, "Leave. Please don't make this uglier." She left without shouting. But as she walked away, I saw the shift in her posture. Not defeat. Strategy. That night my attorney called. "Your brother just filed an emergency petition claiming undue influence." I exhaled slowly. Of course he did. My attorney's voice was calm. "Don't worry. The video is solid. The medical evaluations are solid. The board minutes are solid. He's flailing." I looked out at the city lights from my office window and realized something that made me almost laugh. Hudson didn't want the company. He wanted the identity that came with it. And my mother didn't want fairness. She wanted a narrative where her son was still the hero. But I was done living inside their fantasies. Before we move into the legal storm Hudson tried to unleash. "Thank you for staying with me through this quieter rise. If this story of holding your ground feels familiar, your support through a like, comment, share, or a gentle subscribe truly means a lot to me. I'm grateful you're here." Hudson's petition hit the court system like a flare. Undue influence, coercion, elder manipulation. He painted himself as the wounded son, returning home only to find his inheritance stolen by a scheming daughter. My mother worked the phones like a campaign manager. Within 48 hours, relatives I hadn't heard from in years were suddenly concerned. They texted questions that weren't questions. "Are you okay? Why are you doing this to your father? Hudson says you forced him to sign. Your mom is devastated." Then the emails started. One vendor asked if we were stable. A hospital procurement manager asked if our contracts were safe. A competitor suddenly offered to help transition accounts if our company was in turmoil. Hudson wasn't just suing me. He was trying to bleed the business until the board panicked and gave him what he wanted. He underestimated one thing. I had been managing crises for 5 years. His tantrum was not my first fire. I called an emergency leadership meeting. Not with panic, but with precision. Department heads, legal counsel, compliance, finance, HR. We sat in the conference room where my father used to give speeches about family values, while I silently carried his reality. I stood at the front and said, "You're going to hear noise, lawsuits, rumors, posts. I won't ask you to ignore it. I'll ask you to trust the facts." Then I handed out packets. Independent audit engagement letter. Board minutes confirming the governance clause. Medical assessments affirming Dad's mental capacity at signing. The original recorded video. time-stamped and notarized. A timeline of my operational decisions during Dad's illness, with performance metrics showing stability and growth. No drama, just evidence. I watched something subtle happen as people read. Shoulders dropped. Eyes softened. A quiet shift from uncertainty to loyalty. Not because they liked me personally, because they respected competence. That afternoon, I issued an internal memo. 3 paragraphs. Calm. Clear. It ended with one sentence. Operations will continue without disruption. Payroll is secured. Contracts remain valid. Our mission remains unchanged. The next day, 3 hospital clients replied with the same message: "We're with you. Keep going." Hudson's smear campaign didn't land the way he expected. So he escalated. He held a family gathering at my parents' house and invited half the town's gossips. Then had my mother's friend record it and post clips online. In the video, my mother cried dramatically about losing her family, and Hudson sat beside her, jaw clenched, talking about betrayal and duty. He never once mentioned the 5 years I kept the company alive. He never once mentioned being absent. He never once mentioned the board's clause. He didn't need truth. He needed sympathy. By the end of the week, he filed a motion to freeze company decisions until the court ruled. That was dangerous. If the court granted it, even temporarily, it could stall shipments and jeopardize contracts. Not because Hudson cared about patients, because he knew pain points. I met my attorney that night. "Can we prevent the freeze?" I asked. He nodded. "Yes, but we should be aggressive. We can file a counterclaim for harassment, interference, and elder coercion against your mother and brother, based on their pressure tactics since the party." I thought of my mother showing up at my office, implying she'd push Dad to recant. I thought of Hudson's threats to ruin me. I thought of the years they treated my labor as invisible. "File it," I said. My attorney slid another document across the table. "Also, we should request a court-ordered cognitive evaluation of your father, plus sworn testimony on the video." I swallowed hard. Dad didn't deserve to be dragged like this. Not after what he suffered. But Hudson was forcing it. "Do it," I whispered. "If Hudson wants to use Dad as a weapon, he can face what that looks like in daylight." The hearing was set for the following Tuesday. 7 days. Hudson texted me that night, like he couldn't help himself. "Enjoy your last week pretending you're in charge." I stared at the message, then handed my phone to my attorney. He raised an eyebrow. "He sent that, yes." I said, "And he'll send more." My attorney smiled slightly. "Good. Let him." Because at the hearing, Hudson wasn't going to meet the nervous, apologetic sister he imagined. He was going to meet the woman who built the empire he tried to steal. And I was done being polite. The courthouse wasn't dramatic the way movies make it look. It was fluorescent lights, uncomfortable benches, and a quiet hum of people waiting for their lives to be decided in 30-minute increments. Hudson showed up in a tailored suit with a Bible tucked under his arm like a prop. My mother arrived clutching tissues, already tear-streaked, as if she'd been rehearsing grief in the mirror. My father came last, escorted by his rehab aide. He moved slower now. His face looked tired in a way that made my chest ache. He avoided my eyes, not out of hatred, but out of shame. Hudson's attorney opened with a clean, emotional pitch. "Your Honor, my client's father was vulnerable, recovering from a stroke. The daughter, Camille Hartley, exploited that vulnerability to strip the son of his rightful inheritance and seize control of the family business." Rightful inheritance. Hudson nodded solemnly beside him, as if he was hearing the story for the first time. My mother stood when called, hand to her chest. My husband wasn't himself, she cried. Camille pressured him. She used paperwork and business language he didn't understand. Hudson has suffered so much, he came back trying to heal. And she humiliated him. Then Hudson took the stand. He didn't talk about the company's patience. He didn't talk about payroll. He didn't talk about the 5-year absence. He talked about feelings. I just want what my father promised, he said, voice shaking. I want my family back. Camille turned everyone against me. She's always been controlling. Controlling. The word sat in the room like a bad smell. When it was my turn, I stood slowly and faced the judge. My hands were steady. My voice was calm. I didn't take anything that wasn't already decided. I said, my father signed governance protections years ago because the board required stability. The only reason we're in court is because my brother wants the title without the work. Hudson's attorney jumped up. Objection. Argumentative. The judge raised a hand. Overruled. Continue. My attorney approached the bench with a tablet. Your Honor, we'd like to submit Exhibit A, the recorded signing. Notarized. Time-stamped. With the founder clearly stating this was his decision. The judge watched the clip in silence. My father on the screen. Older but lucid. Saying plainly that Camille was keeping the company alive, and this was his decision. My mother's sobs stopped mid-breath. My attorney then submitted Exhibit B, the independent audit showing no irregularities, no coercive transactions, and a clear chain of custody for corporate documents. Exhibit C, board minutes from 5 years ago, establishing the trigger clause and the reason for it. Exhibit D, the court-ordered cognitive evaluation from a licensed neurologist, stating my father understood the documents at signing and was competent to make decisions. Hudson's attorney's confidence began to leak. Hudson himself started blinking rapidly, jaw tightening, as if he could physically will the evidence to disappear. The judge looked down at the paperwork, then back at Hudson. Mr. Hartley, she said, your petition alleges undue influence and incapacity. Yet the evidence shows your father was competent. The process was documented, and the company has operated under Ms. Hartley's leadership without disruption. Hudson swallowed. But it's not fair. The judge's tone cooled. Fairness is not the standard here. Legality is, and legality does not support your claim. My mother stood abruptly. But he's her brother, the judge turned sharply. Sit down. Ma'am. My mother sat, stunned. The judge continued. This court will not freeze a functioning medical supply business based on unsupported allegations, especially when the petitioner's actions appear designed to interfere with operations. Hudson's face flared with panic. That's not... The judge held up a hand. Furthermore, I am noting the counterclaim for harassment and interference. Mr. Hartley, you are advised to cease contact with company clients and board members. Any further attempts to destabilize operations may result in sanctions. The gavel struck. Denied. Just like that. Hudson's entire plan collapsed. He turned toward my father. Desperate. As if Dad would save him. My father didn't move. He simply stared at the floor, shoulders sagging beneath the weight of his own choices. As we stepped out into the corridor, my mother hissed my name like a curse. Hudson looked at me with raw hatred. But under it was something else. Fear. Because now he understood he couldn't bully his way into control. And he also understood something even worse. The law had seen him. Before we close this chapter, Thank you for staying with me through the moment. Truth met daylight. If Camille's story of holding the line against family pressure resonates with you, your support through a like, comment, share, or a gentle subscribe truly means more than I can say. I'm grateful you're here. After the hearing, life didn't suddenly become gentle, but it became honest. The board stopped tiptoeing around my family's feelings and started operating like a business again. We restructured vendor agreements, strengthened compliance, and expanded into 2 new hospital networks, for the first time since my father's stroke. The company wasn't surviving, it was growing. Dad came to the office a week later. Alone. No mother at his elbow. No Hudson, hovering like a shadow. He stood in the lobby staring at the wall of framed photos, then turned when he heard my footsteps. I watched the video again, he said quietly. I didn't speak. He swallowed hard. I did sign it. I remember more than I admitted. My chest tightened. Why did you let them act like you didn't? His eyes watered. And the answer was smaller than I expected. Because I was ashamed, he whispered. Ashamed that I lost years to illness. Ashamed that my family needed you. Ashamed that I still wanted to believe Hudson could be better. I nodded slowly. Wanting isn't building. Dad. He flinched. But he didn't argue. He simply said, I'm sorry. It wasn't a grand apology. It wasn't a speech that fixed everything, but it was the first truthful sentence he'd given me in a long time. My mother didn't apologize. She pivoted. Within a month, she began calling people in our community again, trying to rebuild the narrative, but without the legal ground beneath her. She sounded like someone arguing with a locked door. Hudson tried to apply for roles in other companies, using our family name like a badge. It didn't work. People remembered the hearing. They remembered the attempted freeze. They remembered that he was willing to gamble with patients' supplies for his ego. Then, when the dust finally settled, my mother showed up at my office again. This time, she came smaller. Not kinder. Smaller. Camille, she said. Voice soft. We're struggling. I didn't invite her in. I stood in the hallway where security could see us, where the power dynamic was clear. She clasped her purse with both hands. Hudson needs help. He can't find work. Your father's retirement is complicated now. We need support. Support. There it was again. I asked the simplest question. Are you here because you're sorry? Or because you're out of options? Her silence answered. She tried a different angle. Eyes shining with the same old performance. You don't want to be the daughter who abandons her family. Do you? I looked at her calmly. You abandoned me emotionally for 5 years while I carried you. Her lips trembled. But there was no remorse. Only calculation. Just give Hudson a small salary, she pleaded. A title. Something. Let him save face. I shook my head gently. I won't pay him to exist. Her face tightened. So you're punishing him forever? No. I said, I'm refusing to reward him for trying to destroy what I built. She took a step closer. He's your brother, and I'm your daughter. I replied, you didn't protect me, so I'm protecting myself. That was the moment she realized the old guilt tricks didn't work anymore. Her eyes hardened. And for a second I saw the same woman who smiled at Hudson's crowning dinner while I sat invisible at the table. She turned and walked away without another word. Later that evening, I sat alone in my office. Lights dim. The city hum in the distance. I opened the vault drawer and looked at the keys I'd set down at that party. Not because I missed the past, Because I understood it, the keys were never just metal. They were permission, access, ownership. And I finally knew this: I could love people and still refuse them access to my life. I could forgive a father and still not surrender my future. I could let my mother and brother go without hatred. Because boundaries aren't cruelty. They're survival. I locked the drawer, turned off the light, and walked out into the night with steady steps, knowing the empire I protected would keep feeding hospitals tomorrow, and the life I built would keep belonging to me.